Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris. This is top 3. This is Mrballen. I'm doing a few of these just to kind of get back into things because I like them and I don't do them that much anymore and I miss them. Top 3 videos is Disturbing Backstories Part 8. I did a quick check, did not find it, so I'm hoping that 7 was the last one I did. I could have done a really in-depth check. I don't feel like doing that. So let's just guess that I haven't, and let's get to the video starting now.
We look at 3 progressively more disturbing stories, and at the end of each of them, I will play the real footage that goes with them. But before we get into In February of 2019, a young man named Austin and his family moved to Houston, Texas. As soon as they arrived and they had their stuff pulled off the vehicles, Austin went out looking for a job. Because he was brand new to the area and his family was really tight on cash, he started looking for jobs that people didn't necessarily want, the types of jobs that would hire him really quickly.
Typically, I found those jobs to be like an oral bull masturbator, somebody who has to bash the brains in of baby seals, because you know how they get out of line. Scraping athlete's foot off of another human being with only your teeth. These are things that, high paying, I think.
And luckily, 5 minutes down the road from his house was a gas station that was looking for someone to take the dreaded 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Austin went over there, he applied, and was quickly given the job, and quickly realized how miserable it is to sleep all day and work all night. 3 months later, in May, Austin woke up one evening to get ready for work, and he realized the power was out. So he left his bedroom and headed downstairs where his father was, and he asked him, how long has the power been out? And his dad told him that basically as soon as Austin had come home from his last shift, it had gone out, and the power company says it's going to be a while before it comes back on again. Austin stepped outside onto his front porch underneath the overhang, and it was pouring rain. And in fact, it had been raining when he had come back from his last shift, and looking out at his front yard and the streets, which were all flooded, it was clear it had just not stopped raining. And he's looking around and all the houses are completely dark, the streetlights are even dark. So this power outage is pretty massive. Austin wasn't...
We had a power outage in August, July, August, and into September. It was 6.5 weeks. Weeks! It was a tornado had went over. I've discussed this in my previous videos a long time ago. I think a story time video or something, I don't remember. Yeah, 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks. And it was not pleasant. It was straight up 1700s. You walked outside, you fanned yourself, you sat on the porch. The pleasure of just going to a Walmart and just walking around because you were happy to be doing something where civilization. Getting in your car and hearing the air conditioner going, it was terrible.
Sure, if he was going to need to go into work that day because of the flooding and the power outage. So he called his manager and he asked her. And she would say that, yes, we do need you to come in, but not for your normal job because the store is without power like everyone else. What we want you to do is just sit inside the store with the doors locked to prevent looting. Feeling a little let down that he still had to work, Austin grabbed a cup of coffee, put on his rain boots and his rain jacket, and ran out to his car. The drive to work was surreal. Not only was it totally dark because there was basically no streetlights on and all the houses are dark, but as Austin was driving, the roads were flooded, but because there was no light, it was very difficult to gauge how deep these puddles were. And on the road, periodically, he would see cars that had miscalculated the depths of these puddles and clearly had gotten stuck, and the driver had just abandoned their vehicle. He described the scene as feeling like something out of a zombie apocalypse movie. Austin finally got to the gas station parking lot, which was slightly elevated, so there was a whole bunch of cars that had been left in the lot, presumably to avoid being flooded. And so he pulls into a spot and he sees his manager is in the store. She sees him. He hops out of the car. He runs up to the door. She unlocks it. She lets him in. She shuts it and locks it behind him. Austin had never been inside the store without power on, and he said what struck him as soon as he walked in was not just that it was totally dark, but it was totally quiet. All the drink machines and the cooler and all the kind of ambient sounds were all gone, and it was just totally quiet. He turned to his manager, who was using her phone as a flashlight, and she said to him, look, there's not much for you to do here, so keep the doors shut, let me know if you need anything, and if the power comes back on again, open the store as usual. She handed him the keys and left out the front door. He locked the door behind her and then walked over to one of the tables inside, up against the side of the store. When he sat down, he got out his phone to start watching some YouTube videos to kill the time, but he quickly saw that there was no internet.
Maybe he's gonna watch this video. I know this story, and this guy that this story is about, I did this story on a different video, covered it for some other channel, and he actually made a comment in there about it. He was like, yeah, that was me, because there was a part in there where he goes, did you hear that? And he laughed at my comment, because I was like, yeah, I heard it. What are you doing? Stop sitting there, start running. So I kind of know this story.
Internet service. And he figured, well, I guess the power outage must have affected internet providers. And so now, totally bored without the internet, he got up and got a couple energy drinks, and he sat down at this table and just smashed energy drinks and watched the rain. And after about an hour of doing that, he was still really bored, and he thought, you know, I've always wanted to do vlogging, and so why not start vlogging right now? So he gets his phone out and he props it up on the table and he starts recording himself. And so for the next couple of hours, Austin talked into his camera about the storm, about the power outage, about sports, about movies, about all sorts of things. His intent was not really to create a concise vlog so much as to just stay awake doing something. And it was working. He enjoyed doing it. And then around 3 a.m., as he's sitting there talking to his camera, you hear the unmistakable sound of someone banging really hard on the inside of the coolers on the other side of the store. And Austin immediately stops talking and turns his head and looks. And he hears it again. Very distinct pounding coming from the other side of the building. At this point, Austin is still looking. He's not even flinching. He's just staring in the direction of the sound. And then he turns back to the camera when he hears a third sound that doesn't sound like pounding, but it sounds like something else coming from that side of the room. And after that third sound, he's had enough. He gets up, he walks out of the store, locks it behind him, and gets in his car. He doesn't go back inside the store for the rest of his shift, and when his manager shows up, he honks the horn to get her to come over. And she's like, what are you doing out here? Why aren't you in the store like you're supposed to be? And he just shows her the video. As she's watching the video, she's clearly startled by the footage, and at the end of it, she confesses to Austin that lately, employees have been telling her they're hearing weird banging sounds coming from the cooler, and that she had gone in there to check if maybe there was an animal or just something that was causing the sound, and she said she couldn't find it. After this, Austin's manager went inside the store and looked around, and there was no one inside, there was no one in the cooler, and she reviewed the footage of inside and outside the store over the past 12 to 24 hours, and the only people that had come near the store were her and Austin. Austin quit his job there 2 weeks later. Here is some of the footage of Austin inside the gas station.
It is pouring. All day it's been pouring. So I went outside to go check, and our street was flooded. And in front of his street.
Kind of sounds like a box knocked over. That didn't.
You hear that? Something is moving around in the cooler.
Probably a kimono dragon. That scared me at the end right there. Okay. It must have been the Nukes Top 5 that I did. And this video was there. It's in the back seat now.
Screw all that noise.
Smart man.
White Island in New Zealand is one of the world's most accessible volcanoes, with only a third of its cone protruding from the water and one of its walls having fallen in, creating a sort of natural drawbridge. All it takes is a 90-minute boat ride or a 20-minute helicopter ride, and you could be stepping off directly into the crater. The island has a definite menace to it, with the acrid air and the acid lake inside of an inner depression and the abandoned sulfur mine where in 1914, 10 men were swept away to their deaths by a mud avalanche. When this mine closed in the 1930s, the island was largely forgotten about for several decades until the 1990s, when adventure tourism really started to heat up around the globe, and locals in New Zealand started taking advantage by offering boat rides and plane rides out to this kind of otherworldly volcano island. And soon guidebooks were calling a tour of White Island an unmissable trip. Once on the island, tourists were taken on a very established route that started on the southern end of the island on a jetty. They'd walk up a dirt path, they'd go directly through the crater down to this inner depression where they could look over at this acid lake, and then they'd turn around and they'd walk right back, passing by the abandoned sulfur mine on their way back to the jetty. Tourists of all ages could complete this route in about an hour and a half. This volcano is very closely monitored by a geological monitoring service called GeoNet. Every day they rate the danger this island presents on a 0 to 5 scale, and tours are only allowed to take place if it's 0, 1, or 2. Anything above 2 and it's too dangerous. On November 19th, 2019, GeoNet rated the danger of the island as a 2, saying that it looks like, eruptive activity is more likely, but still safe for tourism. Now, make no mistake, anybody that went out to White Island was made fully aware of the risks of going out to the island, including that rating system. Hey, today's a 2, so it's on the upper bounds of what's acceptable, but that was part of the thrill of going out to White Island. It was like you're brushing up with death, but it feels really safe because the guides are out there with you and they're kind of joking about how it might erupt any day. You could be enveloped in an acid mist and obliterated by rocks, and people thought that was like kind of fun. And so when the rating was bumped up to a 2, suddenly people were more inclined to go. It was more exhilarating. Fast forward a few weeks to December 9th, the GeoNet rating is still at a 2, and 5 groups of tourists headed out that morning for White Island. You had 3 big groups that were in 3 separate boats, and you had 2 smaller groups that were in their own helicopter. They made their way out and they arrived around 1 p.m. and they began staggering tours up the path, down into the crater, down to the acid lake, and then back out again. By about 2 p.m., 2 of the large groups that came in on boats had finished their tour, got back on their boats, and were ferrying around just offshore, taking pictures of the island, and 1 of the 2 helicopter groups had already boarded their helicopter and taken off. At 2:09 p.m., 47 tourists and guides were still on the island. 26 were down near the jetty waiting to board their boat to leave, and 21 were still deep inside of the crater. 1 minute later, at 2:10 p.m., one of the cameras operated by GeoNet to measure volcanic activity on the island snapped this picture of the 21 people down in the crater. Now, the image is not clear enough to make out individuals, but you can clearly see body shapes, and it looks like they are relaxed, walking in a straight line, making their way back to the jetty. For all but 3 of them, this would be the final picture of them taken alive. 1 minute later, at 2:11 p.m., the volcano erupted, consuming almost everyone inside of the crater, sending steam and ash and acidic mist 2 miles into the air, followed immediately by another explosion that went horizontally, firing rocks and more acid and boiling steam in all directions. Of the 47 people that were still on the island when it erupted, 19 died instantly and 2 more would succumb to their injuries later. These survivors required so many skin grafts that
If something like that happens, you want to die instantly instead of suffering. Don't want to die, period, but sign me up for the instantaneous part, please.
New Zealand put out a global order for 33.8 square meters, the equivalent of 16 bodies worth. One tourist named Alessandro Kaufman was on White Island that day. He was one of the tourists that was in one of the 5 groups of people that went out. He was in one of the boats, and he was one of the last people to get off right before it erupted, literally minutes before. And he was filming as his boat was loitering just offshore, waiting for the last 47 people to leave the island. Here's what he shot.
It's my marker. It's always got to be interrupted at the good part. I ain't got estrogen, okay? Look at my tits. They're fine. Come on. Come on. Let's go. Back to the video.
Só embarcar.
Good morning.
Wow, it's like Martian territory.
The crater lake level sat there for about 2 years. And in 2000. Iniciamos às 10, são quase 2 horas da tarde, finalizando aqui. É isso, agora partiu pro continente.
Oh.
Man, look. Jeez. I don't know. Come on. Let's get off of here. Jesus.
Why would you say, come on, get us out of here? You wanted to go. They're doing what the boat can do. If you want to go faster, you get out there and jump in the back and start kicking, holding on to it and helping it get some speed going. Or maybe, goddamn, get a paddle. Come on, get us out of here. Well, you wanted to go. That pisses me off right there. Sucks for everyone who died, but
On July 29th, 2008, a little after midnight, a 40-year-old man named Vince Lee boarded a Greyhound bus bound for Winnipeg, Canada, using a fake name. He had left his house abruptly without telling his wife where he was going, but he left her a note, which she would later give to police, and the note just said, "I'm gone, don't look for me, I wish you were happy." Vince rode the bus for 5.5 hours without sleeping and got off when it stopped in Erickson. And the bus driver would say to him, "Hey, this is not your stop, you want to get off at Winnipeg." And Vince apparently just did not turn around, didn't react to him, didn't even seem to hear him, and just calmly walked away. And so the driver eventually just kind of shrugged his shoulders, closed the doors, and headed off. Shortly after the bus left, Vince was spotted sitting on a nearby bench holding a sign that said "Laptop for sale, $600. And over the course of the rest of that day and all night, Vince was spotted by multiple people not moving, not sleeping, sitting upright, looking straight out, not even blinking. The next day, on July 30th, a 15-year-old boy would approach Vince and offer to buy his laptop for $60. And Vince agreed, gave him the laptop for $60. Once the kid walked off with his laptop, Vince got up, went behind a nearby store, and burned some of his belongings before going back to the bus stop he had gotten off at the day before and waited for the bus. A little while later, at 5:55 p.m., Greyhound bus 1170 arrived at the Erickson bus stop, opened their doors, and Vince climbed on board and sat in one of the front seats. Sitting in one of the last seats in the bus was a 22-year-old father named Tim McLean, who had boarded the bus 5.5 hours earlier in Alberta, Canada, after a long stretch working at a carnival. When he got on board, he was exhausted, so he went to the back of the bus, put his headphones in, leaned his head against the glass, and had fallen asleep. And when Vince got on board, that's what Tim was doing. He was still sleeping in the back. As soon as the bus left the Erickson bus stop, some of the 36 other passengers on board would say Vince was acting very strange. He was looking down and muttering to himself, and at one point Vince got up and he was pacing up and down the aisle towards the front of the bus. When the bus made a quick stop, Vince stood up, moved to the very back of the bus, and sat directly next to Tim in the same seat. Tim woke up, turned over, looked at Vince, gave him a quick smile, and then rolled back over and fell asleep, unfazed. The bus started moving again, and then a little while later, at 8:30 p.m., Vince stood up and went to the bathroom in the back of the bus. And some of the other passengers noticed he had a large knife in a sheath on his belt. 5 minutes later, Tim is still fast asleep against the window. Vince comes out of the bathroom and he goes back into his seat, but instead of sitting down, he puts his right knee on his seat and plants his left foot on the ground right in front of his seat, so he's facing Tim. He pulls his knife out of the sheath and drives it into Tim's neck. Tim woke up and he was trying to fight him off of him and he was screaming for help, but Vince was robotic and unemotional, just continuously attacking Tim until he went still. Other passengers were half asleep when this started, and so it took a minute before it registered with everyone what was going on, and quickly people started screaming, and then the bus driver pulled over and people were clamoring to get out of the bus. Once off the bus, a couple of the male passengers decided they had to go back in and try to save Tim, but when they walked up the steps and looked down the aisle, they saw Vince had pulled Tim out into the aisle. Vince's back was to the front of the bus, and they could tell that Tim's head was no longer on his body. At this point, Vince whipped his head around and looked at the three men that had come on the bus, and he jumped up and charged them with the knife, at which point the three men retreated and ran out of the bus, and luckily one of them was the driver, who was able to initiate the security system on the bus that made it immobile so Vince couldn't drive it away, and it shut permanently the doors until you deactivated the security system. Vince tried to push the doors open, but he couldn't do it, so he went back up and continued to attack Tim's body. While waiting for the police to show up, horrified onlookers had to watch Vince as he continued to attack Tim, and in fact at one point Vince began eating Tim and actually held his body up to show them what he was doing. Finally, the police arrived, and after a standoff, Vince leapt out of one of the windows and was tased repeatedly and then arrested. Once in custody, he said he was sorry, but he also said the reason he did it was God was speaking to him while he was sitting on the bus, and he was instructing him that Tim was an alien who was going to attack him, and so he needed to go kill the alien to save the world. In a controversial turn of events, Vince Lee was found not criminally responsible for the death of Tim McLean, and so was not given jail time. He was sent to a treatment program that, after he finished, he was fully released. He was allowed to change his name. He has no restrictions. He has no supervision. He is a totally free man. Just minutes after Vince was apprehended by police, one of the passengers who had been sitting near Tim when the attack started gave an interview where he described what happened. Here are segments of his interview.
I was just reading a book. All of a sudden I heard a guy screaming. I turned around and the guy sitting right next beside me was standing up and stabbing another guy with a Rambo knife. Repeatedly. Everybody got off the bus. Me and a trucker that had stopped and the Greyhound driver ran up to the door to maybe see if the guy was still alive or we could help or something like that. And at that point, when we saw the head, we knew that the guy was dead. So then he saw us. He came back to the front of the bus, told the driver to shut the door. He pressed the button and the door shut. The three of us had weapons from the trucker's truck there, and we just stayed outside while he tried to get out the door. Telling him, no, stay put, stay there, don't try to come out. Some people were puking, some people were crying. The guy, he didn't care at all. He wasn't concerned with anybody, but the guy that he stabbed was listening to his headphones and sleeping. I honestly don't think that the guy knew him at all. I think he was just really crazy.
So that's going to do it, guys.
So that guy, I hope, is dead. Yes, I am actively rooting for the death of that man wherever he is. That, yeah, he should be dead. Nothing more to say other than that. Be a shame if somebody threw down some money to kill that man. I would never dream of throwing down, a good $5 on seeing that man murdered. I mean, it would be worth it. All in shiny nickels. Wow. Aside from the fact that guy just, they'd let him go, the other man, he was killed, is decapitated, repeatedly stabbed, and his family gets no closure from that. It's not like people don't know what happened. I'm just getting angry now. $5 in nickels. That's what should be given out to whoever gets rid of that gentleman. All right. Like and subscribe, or that guy will come after you, because I'll give him nickels. And we've already seen what he'll do for free.